Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Becca. I'm a fisheries biologist with the Yakama Nation Fisheries with the Yakama Nation Watershed Reservation Project. And I'll be presenting the proposal for the Ahtanum Creek Reach Assessment between river miles 9 and 26, project number 261497. So before we talk about the assessment, I wanted to give an overview of the location, just for people who might be outside of Yakima County and wanting to know where Ahtanum Creek is. So in orange, we have Yakima County. In purple, we have the Yakama Nation Reservation. And then in yellow, we have Ahtanum Creek. As you can see, Ahtanum Creek runs along a portion of the northern part of the Yakama Nation Reservation where it borders Yakima County. And so getting specifically to our reach assessment location, we propose a reach assessment between river miles 9, which is in Yakima, where South 62nd Avenue is, until river miles 26, which is near Southport Road in Yakima. And so just going back here, I wanted to say a little more about Ahtanum Creek. So historically, we saw larger populations of bull trout, steelhead, spring chinook, and other resident fish, but due to a few factors regarding habitat and other limiting factors that I'll talk about in a second, we've seen these populations decline over time. And so part of the importance of this reach assessment is looking at what the habitat conditions are currently and then assessing, getting information from any past studies that were done so we can be better informed about what projects we plan to do and when we can do this projects in this area. And we chose this area specifically because river mile 26, that's kind of where the confluence of the forks are. And so up above that, it's more forested, it's a more forested landscape. And so we don't see as many like habitat issues up there as we see like in this middle portion. And then past South 62nd Avenue, it becomes increasingly like way more residential, way more industrial uses. And so this portion, 9 through 26, we thought would be the best to capture such a large area and make the most impact when it comes to habitat restoration projects. For steelhead and bull trout and other fish. So some of those limiting factors that I mentioned previously, looking at previous reports in the past, there was fish passage, so that was an issue along this along Ahtanum Creek, and so some of that has already been addressed. In 2018, there was a WDFW fish passage barrier assessment, and so it looked at the different barriers in Ahtanum Creek, and so they've already started to address those barriers. Some of the channel conditions, so in the past, there was removal of large trees, which has affected how much wood is collected in the stream. And so there's also just a general lack of large woody debris in the stream. And so this, the large woody debris provides pools and spawning travel and protection from predators and things like that for fish. So the lack of this does affect habitat quality. That also ties into the conditions, the riparian conditions along Ahtanum Creek. So the large woody debris also acts as bank stabilization. And so in some areas we see incision and, banks that are really in size. And so here, this is by Lynch Lane, and that's within our reach assessment area. And so you can see really incised banks along this, along that road and that part of the creek right there. And then there's also invasive species present in the riparian zone, and then we see old stands of cottonwoods that are dead now, and so there's not much living vegetation. That shows that there was disruption in the riparian zone of Ahtanum Creek in different areas, and so this would be one of the things we look at in this reach assessment. And then low flows, this should be more like 15 TFS, but it's still pretty low flows in summer. And so that's another one of the limiting factors that are affecting the fish population in Ahtanum. So our reach assessment also aligns with a few of the goals that are outlined in a few recovery plans. So the 2009 Yakama Steelhead Recovery Plan and the Bull Trout Action Plan. In the 2009 Steelhead Recovery Plan, Ahtanum Creek is highlighted as important habitat for the Natchez population of steelhead. And so I believe it was Natchez action number 27 or 29 that outlines the Ahtanum Creek looking at grazing impacts and how we can improve the riparian zone in that way. And so our reach assessment will look into that and look at the riparian zone of Ahtanum Creek and how we can improve it and the current conditions, past conditions, and how we can do better. And then the Yakama Bull Trout Action Plan. Ahtanum Creek's also highlighted in this plan with specific actions for improvements. So action number 1 and action number 9 for Ahtanum. Specifically, it calls for projects along main stem Ahtanum and looking at improving riparian conditions as well. So this reach assessment doesn't cover the whole Ahtanum, but it covers a large portion of it where habitat is pretty degraded and there's a need for us to look into it to improve conditions. And then I also was looking through, and there are Ahtanum Creek is also highlighted in the tagged action projects as one of the streams, one of the important streams for this. And so before I go into the components of a reach assessment, I wanted to go through why it's important, what it is, and why we need to do it in Ahtanum. So a reach assessment is a tool for identifying areas for habitat improvement and enhancement and looking at where limiting factors can be addressed. So in Ahtanum, we want to make sure that we know the current conditions along river miles 9 through 26 so that we can do a list of prioritized potential projects and so that we can be more efficient when we're planning these projects. So this is going to be the first step of that process. So before we design and ask for funding for projects, we want to know what projects will maximize the benefit to the stream and to salmoniid habitat. And so the reach assessment is one way we can do this. And then it also looks at the past and the present conditions. So there have been previous studies along Ahtanum, so it'll incorporate that as well as the successful consults that will do the current conditions of the stream. And then at the end of the reach assessment, we're gonna have a list of habitat projects that are prioritized so that we get a better idea of what we can do. And so this reach assessment will also build on the previous assessments done in Ahtanum, which looking at, except for the WDFW fish passage barrier assessment, the other ones are pretty outdated. So 1998 and 2004, there hasn't really been a watershed assessment of Ahtanum Creek in a long time, looking at habitat conditions. So this will build on the previous work and not really repeat anything since the 2018 study was looking at fish passage barriers. So it'll go nicely with the barriers and habitat conditions. So our specific goals for the reach assessment is to assess the current habitat conditions for steelhead, lamprey, bull trout, and other salmoniid species in river miles 9 through 26 of Ahtanum Creek. Analyze the hydraulic conditions in Ahtanum Creek and identify the different areas of concern, which areas are impacting habitat quality, habitat availability. And then we hope to produce a list of prioritized projects that will then improve the habitat abundance and quality in Ahtanum Creek. So going into some of the components of our reach assessment. So up there we have characterizing the assessment area. This will be looking at past projects, past studies, any past information that will be helpful to inform the current conditions. Biophysical setting, how fish are using the stream currently, and then also any human disturbance along Ahtanum Creek. Then we'll also be doing a field assessment using the Forest Service Level 2 habitat survey method, looking at the geomorphology, the vegetation communities around the riparian area of Ahtanum. This is mostly the field portion. And then we'll be taking that data and then analyzing the river miles 9 through 26, looking at how sediment is moving through the system, looking at floodplain surface mapping, analyzing the vegetation communities from the data collected in the field assessment, and then looking at how water is moving through this. And then at the end, there will be evaluation of the data, and then it will produce a list of potential projects in that area with them being prioritized. Then looking at, there'll also be conservation areas that are identified. As a good way to some of the outcomes and benefits. So after the reach assessment, we'll have a more improved understanding of the habitat quality along the miles 9 through 26. We'll have identified and prioritized habitat enhancement projects that we can then later implement. And then we'll also have recommendations on the sequencing of future project implementation. So we'll have an order in which we hope to implement these projects. So the reach assessment provides just like the groundwork, so we are better informed when it comes to decision making for projects. And especially in this reach, we want to make sure to do everything right with these projects. So the funding breakdown, we're asking for 150,000 for surfboard, and then bondable tower administration provide the other 150,000. These estimates come from some of the other reach assessments we've done. So lower Toppenish reach assessment, mid status riparian assessment, and reach assessment. So that's kind of how we came up with these figures for around 300,000 for the reach assessment. And this should be the last slide, so I'll take any questions.
I got a question, Becca. Thank you
Yes.
for your presentation, first of all. I'm just curious, in your assessment, has there been any consideration of doing some water quality monitoring in concert with that?
Yeah, so I think for this reach assessment, we're not looking at water quality and like the scope of work specifically, but I do think in some of these like field assessment and then in the indicators, there is like portions for water quality. So it'll be integrated maybe into that, but not as big as like a separate thing.
You know, and I'm not that close with ecology, but I don't know, maybe there's some stuff going on out there already. I don't know.
Thanks, Joel. Other questions? Great.
I have a question about the nexus with the BPA funding. Is that funding you already have in hand or you're applying for currently?
Yeah, so this would be Audrey, correct me if I'm wrong, but something that comes out of our like BPA budget that we have, and so we'd be like budgeting for this project.
So you already have that funding.
Yes.
So.
Then go ahead, and then I'll call on this one.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So this assessment, is it gonna look at developing a strategy for that section? And then prioritizing projects?
Yeah, so at the end of the assessment,
Good.
yeah, so it'll take all that data and then the way we've done it in past assessments is they've provided like potential projects, recommendations and restoration treatments for specifically river miles 9 through 26. And so then from there, they'll be prioritized by like how big of an impact they'll have into that specific study area. So they'll be prioritized and then we can select and plan based on that.
Yeah. Just wanted to try to figure out, phrase my question.
Is it gonna look at like the global problems?
So water temperature, water quality.
And the projects that be focused on fixing those water issues that affect the whole thing, or is this stretches to?
That's more of, so we're looking at mostly like habitat. So there, I know there are some issues with like temperature and a bunch of other different factors, but, for this specific one, it's more of like the habitat of like what's available on Ahtanum Creek, rather than some of those like really large. Like,
And lower assessment taken into account. The landowners and stuff, it's.
yes,
History of the projects are highly dependent.
yeah, so.
So then what the actual plan, you'll let us meet it.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question as well. So I didn't include it in here, but we do have like a landowner plan, like outreach plan. So we're working with Ahtanum Irrigation District, North Yakama Conservation District, WDFW. We have like partners that we're gonna collaborate with, especially when it comes to landowner outreach. So we're definitely gonna inform the landowners and work with them, present our project and what we're gonna do, what we plan to do. Notify the landowners, and then when it comes time for crews to go out there, we do ask for permission if they need to like get out onto the landowner's property that's along the creek. So there's plans for us to get permission for the landowners. Yeah, that's good.
Thanks, Sean.
If I can add a
Oh, Todd, go ahead.
I'm Audrey Scott. I'm the lead biologist for the Yakama Reservation Watershed Project, working with Becca. And I came just for more support and to add on to any, questions and answers as needed. As far as the prioritization, it's gonna take into account reach ecosystem, indicators. And those are gonna be developed prior to field work based off of the Forest Service Level 2 habitat metrics, and then it'll also incorporate information we uncovered through hydraulic modeling. And the prioritization is gonna help identify sub-reaches that are the most departed from current conditions. And that's gonna call out the reaches that are higher priority, and within those, we'll develop a list of projects which will feed into the prioritization and have specific rankings. And what we've done in the past for incorporating things like landowner willingness and feasibility is to have a separate spreadsheet where we can go in and input those factors, like we know this landowner is going to work with us, so maybe that increases the project a bit, but that way it's separated out from the technical hard data versus something that's more subjective and may change over time.
Answer was what more eloquent.
Sean online?
Yeah, there was mention that there was a reach analysis or some version of that in 2004, and we're, you know, that's dated. I mean, to me, a lot of things don't change that dramatically in 20 years. I mean, some things can, but what is insufficient about that makes us think we need to, you know, invest in a new study here?
Well, I wouldn't say it's more like insufficient. That one was like a whole watershed assessment, and versus this one is specifically River Miles 9-26. So it's a different like scope of work. It's a different scope overall. So, but that one will definitely be integrated into some of the characterizing the assessment area portion of the study. So looking at the past projects and studies, that's a big component of it. So they'll definitely be using that as groundwork as well. But this one is more specific to River Miles 9-26, and that one was more of like a whole watershed assessment, looking up above the courts as well.
Did it assign or did it, you know, did it identify priorities or things that should be fixed in this part of the river?
From what I can remember, it didn't identify like specific projects, but it did identify some of those like limiting factors, and then it did provide some recommendations for improvement overall in the watershed, but not specifically like a specific project can be done here to listen chapter.
Have we followed up on the recommendations of that study already?
I'm not too sure about if we have.
And this is something, if you, we can help dig out. There were two assessments done. One was the original fish barrier assessment, which was a barrier and screening assessment, and that was large. The recommendations there from that 04 one were largely implemented in 2018. Identified some cleanup type work, but huge progress between 04 and now on the passage of screening and the in-stream flow agreements. The other assessment was done as part of the Pine Hollow storage proposal, which was a storage reservoir that had been proposed to serve Ahtanum Creek. And that does identify some reaches and projects, but I would say, Sean, it does not focus on floodplain restoration as we would talk about it now. I think there's valuable info in both. They'll be good to mine, but I'd say that none of them are a match based on. And I'm just jumping in as one of the people that it had just been completed when I started 20 years ago.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you. No, I'm just, I'm asking because I'm starting to see this in different places where we're doing assessments. The tools now are a little bit different. I'm not sure they're really, really that much better. And, oftentimes we do these assessments and plans and we implement 10% of them, and time goes by and we want to do a new assessment. So that's kind of why I was checking in. That was kind of the direction of those questions. So thanks, Alex. I appreciate the context. I do have one other question. Most of the land in this reach, is it mostly private? Is it mostly public? What's kind of the major potential types of landowners that you'll be dealing with on projects identified here?
Yeah, so on the northern, on the northern side of Ahtanum Creek, it's more private landowners. And so that's why we'll be working closely with our organizations to collaborate to outreach to landowners. And then on the southern side, it's more like, on the reservation, it's more allotments and land. So there's definitely private landowners that we'll have to communicate with before we do anything.
Other questions? Okay.
Has there been an influx of brook trout in Ahtanum? Do you guys know?
I'm not too sure about brook trout. Just reading that.
One of the watersheds we can call brook trout free to your knowledge, and I think no one raises their hand. Says I know.
I haven't heard.
There is brook trout though, isn't there on the upper, should it south or north?
Yes, we haven't found very many reds in recent years, but there have been some documented trout.
Up higher though, not in this reach there.
So when they did all the passage and screening projects in the mid-2000s, I see Brian nodding his head, he's probably on the ground. The fish salvage of those diversion projects, almost always there are one or two sub-adult bull trout in the upper half of this reach. So there definitely is some migration, different discussion from the bull trout thing, but and if we could ever restore more fluvial migration, bull trout, it'd be a big deal. The little dinky fish that stay up in the mountains will never come down, have 500 eggs. The fish that spend their whole winter doing a big migration wherever the food come back with 3,000 eggs. It's a huge difference in everybody.
Other questions? Got a little bit of time. Anything, so at this time, we're looking at 3 sites, is that right, for site tours?
Yeah, so we were looking at maybe River Mile 9, 26, and then in the middle, it's around here. There's another site that we were looking at for site. But we're still working on what would be best. We're also thinking maybe just one site and kind of one site that will show a lot of kind of what we're hoping to improve the habitat conditions here. That might be better travel wise, because it does take a long time to go from the end to the start.
Gotcha. Putting it to the group, is there anything in particular you would like to see at site tours that might inform their decision?
I might add, down there at 62nd Avenue, we had done a pretty big restoration down there in a prior career. So there's a lot of action, large wood in there. That might be a site that you would show what could be. But I think that one's been addressed a little bit.
Anyone else? Anybody online? Well, Becca, is there anything that you expected to be asked that we didn't ask?
Not really. I was hoping someone would ask about the landowners, which I'm glad someone did. That's a really important part. Other than that, not really.
Any uncertainties that you thought the Tiger CC might have raised?
For me, the biggest one was the land, since that is a big component of this project, and like you never know what's gonna happen in production, outreach to people and explain what you're doing. That was mostly one of those things that I was concerned about.
Well, one last question to the group. Any burning questions? Hearing none. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.